Okay, so it baffles me that nobody else on YouTube has made a video talking about this thing, because this thing has saved me so much hassle and saved me so much time as a DM, and a lot of time and hassle to my players as well. This thing. This is the Arcane Goods Wild Shapes deck. And essentially what it is just a bunch of cards that has druid animal or just animal statistics on the back of it. Focus. The concept here is pretty simple, but from my experience, it has done a lot in my game. Because as a DM, I like to let new players jump into the game. And I like to add a lot of guest players quite often. You know, people who have never played D&D but want to experience it and just hang out with my group of friends and be a part of that. But from my experience, a majority of the players that I've been introducing that have never played D&D, for some reason, always want to play a druid. And that drives me kind of crazy as a DM. I don't want to be the person who says, no, I'm not going to let you play druid. Because to me, druid's one of the most complicated classes in the game. You have full-on spellcasting. You can change your spells when you take a rest. You have armor restrictions. And then there's the dreaded wild shape. When you turn into a creature, you gain their 3 physical traits, but not their mental traits, which you keep your own. You also keep the skills you're proficient in and the saving throws you're proficient in, but then you also gain whatever proficiencies that the other animal has, and then you have to learn that new animal's attacks and armor classes. And if you're a new player, all this just right over your head. And it really slows down the game. And I always forewarn the new players of like, okay, this is very complicated. Are you sure you want to play this? And if they say yes, then more power to you. I don't want to crush your spirits for playing a female turtle druid that lives in the sewers and her name's Donatella. That's fine, you're a guest player, have fun. And from my experience, new players who are druids that are trying to animal shape, the game doesn't do it in an easy way. All the outside stats and sources, you kind of have to compile yourself and figure out what you want to turn into and how that matches in together. It's not all in one spot. That's why this wild shape deck has saved my life as a DM and all the players that are druids at my tables' lives as well, because they have everything in one place. This is a deck of 86 cards of different animal statistics from Dungeons and Dragons. And they're organized in a really nice way where the very top right of the card has the challenge rating of the creature you're turning into. Stats, skills, abilities, nice and simple there for the player. And as a DM, I just come up to the player and I say, hey, you can only turn into creatures of challenge rating 1 or less. Then I just take the section of cards of animals that are a challenge rating of 2 or higher and put them off to the side, and then they're left with easier options, less stuff to pick from, and just not as overwhelming as playing a druid would be. But this Wild Shapes deck isn't just for druids, because as a DM, I'm trying to run a game, and if somebody says, I want to polymorph that enemy into this creature, it's just a simple matter of fact for me to grab this deck, flip to whatever, oh, you want to turn him into a crab? Pull out the crab card, and I have the statistics for a crab right there. And this deck also doubles over to meta players. Say I want to turn into an animal that has the most amount of hit points for whatever combat thing we're going into, or I want to turn into a creature that has the most amount of constitution or strength. Take the deck, scroll or just skim through all the cards until you find a collection of creatures with the statistics that you want, and transform into that, rather than having to browse through the entire monster manual or wherever the monsters would be that you're trying to turn into. And then what I really like about this deck is it's good for ridiculous players like myself. So I have a character concept of a human that burned down a forest and pissed off the goddess Sylvanas, who cursed this poor man by turning him into a tabaxi druid. I love his name. His name is Furball Fireball. And this tabaxi druid, his character flaw is that he's bad at being a druid. So whenever he tries to shapeshift into something, I almost dropped it. I take the deck, I give it a shuffle, and I say, I'm going to shapeshift into a spider. Yeah. Say a spider is a really bad thing to turn into in this situation. I just threw half the deck across the... So let me say a spider's not a good thing for me to shapeshift into during this encounter. Let me try shapeshifting again. I'm turning myself into a quipper? The heck is a quipper? But I like to play characters that are spontaneous and are random and do all sorts of weird stuff. That's why I love Wild Sorcerer, and this is my character version of a wild sorcerer druid that turns into just random stuff. So this deck has all sorts of uses, and it's actually become a staple or like a set piece on my table now of things that are always going to be on my D&D table, because as a dungeon master, I pull from it, and as players, they pull from it as well, whether they're druids or they're trying to polymorph themselves into all sorts of different creatures to have their statistics right there. Now, I'm not sponsored by Arcane Goods in any way. I actually went on their website because I wanted to buy dry erase initiative trackers, which is also a staple that I use in every single one of my D&D games. That has been fantastic. But while I was shopping for that, I came across a druid shapeshifting deck, and I thought it would be helpful, you know, to buy for the druids that are in my game. And the effect that it had and the improvement of just adding quality and smoothness to the entire table is what I really love about this deck. And again, nobody's made a video about them on YouTube, so I'll be the first one. The Wild Shape deck by Arcane Goods is fantastic. There's a link in the description below if you are interested in getting it. And until then, may you have a crabby day.